Ghana isn't just calling people home. It's calling people to build. While we've been told Africa is struggling, the truth is more complex. Ghana's economy, yes, has faced real challenges, but investors see a comeback on the horizon and they're already making moves. The question is, will the diaspora be the last to catch on? Every December, people fly back, not just Ghana, of course, but to other African countries, living their best lives. But while the parties are happening, others are buying the land, closing the deals, and locking in opportunities that could outlive us. This isn't just about Dirty December, by the way. It's about what happens after the party. It's about reclaiming what was always ours and building wealth and legacy that can't be taken away. If you ever dreamed of going back, making a mark, or building something meaningful on the continent, it's time to pay attention because by the time the world figures it out, it might be too late for us. Let's talk about what's really happening and why this moment matters for the diaspora thinking, maybe one day. Welcome back to They Lied About Africa. I'm your host Numbe, and if nobody told you the real story, I will. Before we jump in, here's something to know. For every episode, you can check out the Linktree in my description box if you are on YouTube, or in the show notes if you are listening to the audio straight from Apple Podcasts or Spotify. There you will find a folder with all my sources, extra readings, and anything that I mentioned. So if you want to learn more or fact check me for the research yourself, it's all there. So today's episode is a part of a series on the podcast called Reclaiming the African Story. The focus is simple: history and truth-telling and asking the big question, what really happened? We'll explore everything from country spotlights and lesser-known African figures to ancient achievements like the first universities, medical advancements, and resistance movements, and colonial crimes that rarely get mentioned, and the deeper meanings behind African art and symbols. This series takes its time with each country, helping the diaspora and really anyone who's interested relearn and reconnect with the bigger picture, investing back into African countries, whether through knowledge, business, or culture. That's why today's episode is titled Before You Invest in Ghana. Every episode in this series will follow the same format: before you invest in so-and-so country, breaking down real history, culture, and context before we even think about investment. And yes, I know there are 54 countries, but don't worry, this podcast has plenty of other series and fresh ideas in the works too. This is just one part of a much bigger conversation. Now, why this series before talking about how to actually invest in Africa? I know you're excited to invest. I totally get it, but we have to be smart about this. You can't really invest in a place that you don't understand, because real investment is not just about throwing money at something. It's about knowing the people, the history, the culture, the bigger picture. Think about it. You wouldn't drop $1,200 on a camera without watching every YouTube review, checking TikToks, or testing it in store first. Same with makeup. You're not just grabbing any foundation, you're swatching, checking the shade range, making sure it won't flop under flash. Why? Because you're not just spending, you're investing something that matters to you. It's the same with any African country. You can't invest in a place you haven't studied, haven't listened to, haven't really seen. Real investment isn't just about money. It's understanding the people, the history, the culture, the story. Too often, Africa also gets treated like one big block or business venture when every country has its own story, struggles, and strengths. This series is about relearning what we were never properly taught, and so that any investment, whether financial, emotional, or creative, starts from a place of respect and real knowledge. So essentially, before we talk about the future, we need to understand the past. Now that we've set the stage, let's get into what you came here for, to figure out what you need to know before you invest in Ghana. Now, when I sat down to plan this series, I kept asking myself, where do I even start? Every African country got its own magic, its own story of struggle, power, and beauty. I could have started with Senegal, my roots, my home, but something about Ghana just kept calling me. It's magnetic. It feels like the heartbeat of West Africa. The history, deep, like gold, wisdom, power, empires that were flexing long before much of the world even knew what was up. And the culture, bold, loud, and unapologetic. But somehow the full story of Ghana still stays buried under stereotypes and silence. Why? And how did we let that happen? Today we're peeling off that back. We're starting with Ghana, not because it's the only story worth telling, but because it proves something that we all need to remember. Africa's brilliance has always been there. It's just waiting for the world to finally pay attention. This is the Ghana you need to know. Let's start with something most people don't even realize. The name Ghana carries heavy history. It comes from the ancient Ghana Empire, a powerful kingdom that wasn't even in today's Ghana, but further north in in what's now Mauritania and Mali, Ghana literally means warrior king. Strength, leadership, resilience. So when Ghana gained independence in 1957, they didn't just pick a name, they reached back, claimed that legacy of West African greatness, and stamped it onto their future. The spirit of empire, power, pride, still here, still alive. And honestly, when I sat down to tell Ghana's story, I kept thinking, where do I even begin? There's so much history, there's so many layers, but to really understand Ghana's power, I'm breaking it into 3 things that remind us exactly who Ghana has always been. We're talking its wealth and political power as a major empire, its global trade network, and its rich, deeply meaningful culture. But let's first talk about the Ashanti Empire, one of the most powerful kingdoms in West Africa. The Ashanti were part of the Akan people and built their empire in what's now southern Ghana around the 1600s. They didn't just stumble into power, they had a sophisticated system of leadership, a strong military, and smart alliances that helped them expand their territory and influence. Their capital, Kumasi, became a political and economic center with impressive palaces, organized markets, and incredible craftsmanship, especially in gold. But for the Ashanti, gold wasn't just about wealth. It held cultural and spiritual meaning, and no symbol captured that more than the golden stool. This isn't just a name. It's a real physical stool made of wood and covered in gold leaf. But here's the thing. No one ever sits on it. The Ashanti believe the golden stool holds the soul of the Ashanti nation. Literally, the spirit of their people, past and present. It's more than a symbol of kingship. It's the foundation of their identity and unity. When a new Ashanti king is chosen, the stool is presented as a way to show that his power comes from the people and their ancestors, not just from himself. It's sacred and central to everything the Ashanti stand for. But gold wasn't just sacred. It was also currency, and it's what made the Ashanti impossible to ignore on the world stage. Their wealth in gold attracted European powers like the Portuguese, Dutch, and the British, who set up forts and trading posts along the coast. Through these networks, the Ashanti traded gold, ivory, and enslaved people in exchange for firearms, textiles, and luxury goods. While they weren't connected to the trans-Saharan trade routes further north, the Ashanti built powerful coastal trade relationships that linked them to global markets across Europe and the Atlantic. And with every exchange came more than goods. There were new ideas, technologies, and influences flowing in. Imported textiles also inspired local designs. Firearms transformed warfare. European alliances reshaped diplomacy. Trade didn't just bring wealth, it brought contact, change, and new dynamics that shaped the entire empire's future. And if you thought Ghana's strength was just about gold and trade, nope. The culture ran deep and was incredibly organized. The Ashanti had a full legal and social system where everyone knew their role. Chiefs were political leaders, elders handled community disputes and decision making. Priests and priestesses took care of spiritual needs, and commoners worked in various trades like farming, crafting, or trading. Even families were organized by what's called a matrilineal system, basically your identity and inheritance passed down through your mother's line. That shaped everything from who you could marry to who got what in the family. Nothing was random. Everyone had a place and a responsibility that kept the community stable. Now let's talk about the kente cloth, because it's way deeper than a fashion statement. Kente originated with the Ashanti and was traditionally handwoven on looms by men. Every pattern and every color was intentional and full of meaning. For example, gold in kente symbolizes wealth and royalty, blue stands for peace, green represents growth and renewal, and black connects to ancestral spirits. The patterns themselves had names and told stories. Certain kente cloths were even restored for loyalty or special ceremony, so wearing a specific pattern could instantly tell people your status or role in an event. It was the original Met Gala moment, where every thread carried a story, every pattern a message, and every color reflected pride. Seeing this year's Met Gala theme, Superfine, tailoring black style, I can't help but think of kente as part of that same tradition. Long before fashion runways, the Ashanti were already using cloth as a declaration of identity, resistance, and power, a legacy that continues every time black style is celebrated and reclaimed. Spiritually, the Ashanti practiced what we might broadly call traditional Akan religion. They believed in a supreme god who was all-powerful but kind of distant from daily life. To bridge that gap, they honored smaller gods known as abosom, which represented things like rivers, trees, and other forces of nature. And most importantly, they had deep respect for ancestral spirits, believing that their ancestors stayed connected to the living and watched over them. For the Ashanti, spirituality was woven into their everyday life. Politics, family decision, conflict resolution, festivals, and even farming. Chiefs weren't political leaders, they were also spiritual figures, acting as the bridge between the people and the gods. At the center of it all was the golden stool, which we had mentioned earlier, believed to have descended from the sky and carrying the soul of the Ashanti nation. For the Ashanti, life and spirituality were inseparable, two parts of the same whole. All right, so let's fast forward to when outsiders finally showed up, aka colonization. Ghana became one of the first African countries Europeans locked their eyes on. Why was Ghana so desirable? Ghana was a gold mine, literally. Back then, it was even called the Gold Coast because of how much gold was flowing through its land. But it wasn't just about gold. Ghana had something else that made it a prime target: coastal access. That meant easy trade routes and military advantages. Ashanti's political system was also strong and very well organized, and to Europeans, it looked like an easy takeover. Because why build from scratch when they could just hijack what was already working? Plus, Ghana's coastline was filled with forts and castles that became major hubs for transatlantic slave trade. Basically, Ghana checked every box: resources, power, and a key location. And here's something else that's worth mentioning. The British didn't just control the land, they controlled the money. Before colonization, people used things like gold, dust, and quarry shells for trade, which worked well for local economies. But in 1912, the British introduced the West African pound, which was tied to the British pound and used across their West African colonies, including Ghana. That locked Ghana into a financial system that benefited Britain more than locals. By tying Ghana's currency to the British pound, the British ensured that profits and economic control flowed back to Britain, making local wealth and trade dependent on their system. It is also worth mentioning that even after independence in 1957, Ghana used the West African pound for a bit longer until 1965, when Ghana introduced its own national currency, the cedi, to break from the colonial system and reclaim financial independence. Now, let's talk about what actually happened during colonization beyond the basics. Here's where it gets interesting. Ghana didn't just let it happen. The Ashanti Empire was like, nah, we're not going down easy. They fought back hard. There were actually 5 separate wars between the Ashanti and the British, called the Anglo-Ashanti Wars. One of the wildest moments was the War of the Golden Stool in 1900s. Picture this. British officials demanded to sit on the Golden Stool, okay? The same stool I mentioned earlier, the one that holds the soul over the Ashanti people. The Ashanti were like, excuse me, over our dead bodies. That war wasn't just about land or gold, it was about dignity, identity, and not letting outsiders trample what they held sacred. The British also pulled this thing called indirect rule, so instead of wiping out local leadership completely, they kept chiefs and elders in charge, but only on the surface. So behind the scenes, the British were calling all the shots. Chiefs who once ruled for the good of their people were now pressured to enforce colonial laws and taxes. It created a lot of distrust and blurred the lines between traditional power and colonial control. Now, let's talk about the cocoa boom and exploitation. This is where things get messy in a different way. Ghana became one of the world's top cocoa producers, like huge. But guess who was profiting? Not the farmers. Colonial policies made sure that Ghana did all the growing and hard labor. Britain and other powers were reaping the real benefits. It locked Ghana into a cash crop economy that it's still navigating today. In terms of education, colonial education was one of those double-edged swords. On one hand, it brought literacy and new skills. On the other hand, it was also used to reshape Ghanaian identity. Kids learned British history, British culture, and British ways of thinking, while their own rich histories and achievements were pushed aside or barely mentioned. It created this weird split where people were educated but disconnected from their own roots. And finally, let's talk about infrastructure. Here's something people don't always realize. Yes, colonizers built roads and railways, but they weren't doing it out of kindness. That infrastructure was designed to extract resources, to get gold, cocoa, and other goods out of Ghana as fast as possible. Most of it did not serve local communities at all. So even today, some of the infrastructure Ghana inherited doesn't fully connect its own people. It was built to serve someone else's agenda. A perfect example is the railways. The British built them to move gold and cocoa from places like Kumasi to coastal ports, not to connect Ghanaian communities, and that legacy still shows today. Many regions remain disconnected because the rail system was designed to export, not for the people. That means higher transportation costs, fewer opportunities to reach markets, and slower economic growth for communities outside those old trade routes. The infrastructure wasn't built to serve Ghanaians. It was built to extract from them. And that design still holds people back. So yeah, colonization wasn't just a one-note story of land grabs and gold. It was a deep layered process that reshaped Ghana's economy, leadership, and even its sense of self. What's wild is that despite all of that, Ghana came out of it with its culture and pride intact, ready to rebuild and thrive. But the effects of that era still very real today. All right, so where is Ghana today? In one word, thriving. Its country is over 33 million people, filled with energy, pride, and diversity. Ghana's home to more than 70 ethnic groups, with Akan being the largest, followed by Moldagbani, Iwe, Gadangmi, and others, each with their own traditions, languages, and histories. Speaking of languages, English is currently the official language, but it's far from the only one you'll hear. Twi, Fante, Iwe, Dagbani, and many more fill the streets, markets, schools, and homes, reflecting Ghana's rich linguistic landscape. When it comes to religion, Christianity is the majority. About 70% of Ghanaians are Christian, alongside 18% Muslim, and smaller communities practicing traditional African religions. And Ghana's population? It's young. The median age is around 21 years old, with nearly 60% under the age of 25. Its generation is growing up between deep-rooted tradition and global influences, ready to shape what Ghana's chapter looks like. Before we jump into what's happening right now, let's rewind to a pivotal moment: independence. In 1957, Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to break free from colonial rule. It was a historic moment, not just for Ghana, but for the whole continent. Imagine the energy, people flooding the streets, waving flags, dancing, crying, tears of joy. The hope was electric because for the first time in modern history, an African country had kicked out its colonizers and was charting its own future. But independence didn't just fall from the sky. It was a result of decades of resistance, protests, strikes, and negotiations. Ghanaians had been fighting back, from the Ashanti resistance way earlier to labor strikes and political movements in the 20th century. The people were done being ruled by outsiders who exploited their resources and stifled their voice. Leading that push for freedom? Kwame Nkrumah. He is a name you need to know. Born in a small town in southwestern Ghana, then the Gold Coast, Nkrumah rose from humble beginnings to become one of Africa's most visionary leaders. He studied in the US and the UK, where he got deep into ideas about independence, Pan-Africanism, socialism. And when he returned back home, he turned these ideas into action, mobilizing the masses through protests, boycotts, and political organizing. Nkrumah was sharp, strategic, and unrelenting. Under his leadership, Ghana gained independence in 1957, and he became the country's first prime minister and later its first president. But he wasn't thinking small. Nkrumah wanted all of Africa to rise. He became a global symbol of Black liberation, pushing for unity across the continent, and his influence stretched far beyond Ghana's borders. Now, gaining independence was powerful, but let's be real, it didn't erase the impact of colonization overnight. Ghana inherited an economy set up for extraction, not sustainability. Its political systems had been distorted, and there was a deep identity crisis after decades of being told that West African traditions were not good enough. But Ghana pushed forward. The post-independent years were full of energy and ambition. Right away, Nkrumah's government focused on infrastructure, building new schools, hospital roads, and even the famous Akosombo Dam, which created Lake Volta, one of the largest man-made lakes in the world. That dam provided hydroelectric power that fueled Ghana's development for decades. Culturally, Ghana worked to reclaim its identity. English remained the official language, but there was a huge push to revive and celebrate traditional arts, music, and festivals that had been suppressed or sidelined under colonial rule. You saw this pride in everything from radio broadcasts to local languages and big national festivals like Independence Day parades that blended traditional dance, kente fashion, and modern pride. And on the global stage, Ghana didn't sit quietly. Nkrumah hosted the All-African People's Conference in Accra in 1958, bringing together freedom fighters and leaders from across Africa to strategize on ending colonization everywhere. Ghana became a symbol for what was possible, a beacon for liberation across the continent. Before we dive into challenges, let's zoom out and look at Ghana's political scene today. New Patriotic Party, one of the two major political parties, and the other being the National Democratic Congress. These two parties have basically rotated power since the 1990s, and while their ideologies differ a bit, NPP leans more market-friendly and the NDC tends to push social policies. Both are committed to Ghana's democracy. Ghana is often praised for peaceful elections, but like anywhere else, there are tensions, especially around election time. Recent elections have sparked debates about transparency, but overall, Ghana is seen as one of the most stable democracies in West Africa. Regionally, Ghana plays the role of the reliable neighbor. It's a key member of the ECOWAS, that's the Economic Community of West African States, and it's often looked to for leadership, especially for when there's political drama in nearby countries like Burkina Faso or Mali. Its relationship with big neighbors like Nigeria and Ivory Coast are mostly strong, with the occasional border dispute drama because, neighbors. Internationally, Ghana is a hotspot for foreign investment. China's been building a lot of infrastructure. The US continues to engage through military, trade, and the EU is in the mix too. Bottom line, Ghana knows how to play on the global stage while keeping its own interests in mind. Now, if you're actually thinking about business or investment in Ghana, here's what you need to know. Ghana is often ranked as one of the easier places to do business in Africa, thanks to clear legal protections and incentives for foreign investors. There are tax breaks in certain sectors, and the government's actively pushing entrepreneurship and tech innovation. That said, challenges like bureaucracy and infrastructure gaps can slow things down sometimes. The Ghanaian cedi, that's the currency, has seen some ups and downs, especially with inflation and pressure, but overall, the banking sector is relatively solid and keeps adapting. And if you're serious about investing, having good local partners and legal guidance is essentially key. Now, as much as Ghana is thriving, no country is without its challenges, and it's important that we keep it real. But here's the thing. These challenges, they're not just roadblocks, they're opportunities. Opportunities waiting for smart, creative solutions, and who better to rise to the challenge than the diaspora? Maybe even you. Let's talk about it. First up, youth unemployment. More than half of Ghana's unemployed population is under 35. Think about that. Ghana is a young country. The median age is about 21, and you've got millions of bright, talented young people entering the workforce every year, but the job market, it's not keeping up. This mismatch isn't just frustrating, it's dangerous. It risks losing a generation of potential, or worse, seeing them leave a country in search of opportunity elsewhere. That's the brain drain. And when talent leaves, development slows. But it doesn't have to be this way. Entrepreneurs can flip the script. Imagine more tech hubs, remote work platforms, vocational training programs, tools that can equip young people with practical, in-demand skills, or even let them tap into global markets from right where they are. Some of this work is already happening on the ground. Diaspora investment could scale it, but without action, the cycle of talent leaving continues and the gap gets wider. Then there's Ghana's environmental challenge. One of the largest e-waste dumps in the world is right in Accra. Every day, tons of discarded electronics arrive from overseas. To survive, people, sometimes kids, burn them to extract metals, releasing toxic fumes into the air and soil. This isn't just pollution. It's a public health crisis. Because here's one thing, informal recycling is already a major industry there. Imagine if we brought in safer, eco-friendly recycling tech or upcycled materials into valuable products. Diaspora investment here could transform a toxic dump into a circular economy hub, but if no one steps in, the pollution keeps growing and so does the health risk. And while Ghana's democracy is strong, corruption still shows up in politics and public services. It creates distrust, it slows progress. People want transparency, accountability, fairness. Right now, citizens are demanding better, but imagine tools that help make that happen. Apps to track government spending, digital platforms for reporting corruption, systems that make public services more transparent. Some local initiatives are already pushing for this, don't get me wrong, but without broader support, the fight stays uphill. Infrastructure is another piece of the puzzle. Cities like Accra are growing fast, but roads, sanitation, and affordable housing are struggling to keep up. Traffic jams, overcrowded neighborhoods, uncollected waste, this isn't just an inconvenience. It blocks mobility, health, and opportunity. But imagine a diaspora-backed investment in urban planning, sustainable transport, or affordable housing projects. People are already working towards solutions, but with more resources, they could scale faster. Otherwise, inequality between urban hubs and neglected areas deepens. Healthcare? Ghana's national health insurance scheme has made strides, but rural areas are still left behind. Some villages lack clinics, trained staff, or basic supplies. Right now, mobile clinics and telemedicine startups are emerging to bridge these gaps. Diaspora investment here could expand access further, but without support, these rural communities stay underserved. And then education. Ghana has worked to provide free basic education, but classrooms are overcrowded and resources aren't equal everywhere. Think about it. Growing up here, you probably never had to wonder if you have a desk, a teacher, or a working textbook. But in parts of Ghana, these questions are real. And if kids can't access quality education, it limits their future. And when they can, you unlock doctors, engineers, innovators, leaders who move Ghana forward. Some of these kids just need a chance, okay? Diaspora investment could mean building schools, funding scholarships, or supporting local education startups. But if no one invests, the cycle of inequality keeps repeating. Every challenge I've named, unemployment, e-waste, corruption, infrastructure, healthcare, education, these are not just problems, they are blueprints. Blueprints for something better. Ghana is young. Ghana is rising. But if we want that rise to be shared, sustainable, and led by Ghanaians, we need people like you with resources, skills, and vision to be part of the story. Because here's the truth, if we don't invest in Ghana, someone else will. And they won't always have Ghana's best interests in mind. So why now? Why is this moment such a big opportunity for the diaspora to invest in Ghana? Right now, Ghana's at crossroads, one of the fastest growing economies in West Africa, a young population, 60% over 25, ready to innovate and build, a government actively welcoming diaspora investment with tax breaks, diaspora bonds, and land access programs, and Ghana's hosting the headquarters of the African Continental Free Trade Area, making it a gateway for trade across Africa. At the same time, unemployment, infrastructure gaps, healthcare inequality, environmental risks, real challenges still stand. But here's the thing, every challenge is an opportunity waiting for the right solution. That's why I say before we invest, we got to invest intentionally. Investing with purpose means asking, 1, am I creating opportunity that empowers local communities? 2, am I partnering with Ghanaians or just profiting off of them? And 3, am I building something that will last and uplift, not just extract and leave? I'm not here handing out business plans or telling you exactly where to put your money. That's for you to explore, partner, and build. But what I'm saying is how we invest matters just as much as what we invest in. Whether it's education, tech, clean energy, healthcare, creative industries, whatever aligns with your skills and passions, lead with care, with context, with collaboration. Because the truth is, if the diaspora doesn't step in with care, others already are. Global powers, corporations, they're already moving, and they won't always prioritize Ghana's long-term well-being. So the real question is, if we don't invest with intention now, who will, and what will be left? This isn't just an opportunity. It's a responsibility. So yeah, Ghana is doing incredible things, but there's still so much room to grow. And the beauty is, every one of those challenges is a door waiting to be opened. A door you could walk through, especially if you're part of the diaspora, bringing fresh eyes, fresh skills, and global experience. But now, let's flip it to you. Maybe you're in your 20s, Ghanaian by blood, American by passport. Your parents sacrificed everything to get you here, to study, to succeed, to have options, and now you've got them. So the real question is, what will you do with them? What does it really mean to invest in Ghana? Is it wiring money back home, starting a business, or is it something deeper like reclaiming narratives, rebuilding systems, reconnecting the roots that made you? Here's what I want you to remember from this all. Ghana doesn't need saving. It needs seeing. It needs understanding. Before you ever walked across a graduation stage or clocked in at your first job, your ancestors built empires, resisted oppression, created culture so rich, it's still shaping the world today. That strength, it's yours too. And I get it, and I get it, and I get it, and I get it. Choosing where to build your life isn't easy. Some stay, some go back, some find a way to bridge both. But whatever path you choose, ask yourself, what feels like purpose? What feels like building something that outlives you? Because Ghana's beauty isn't just in the music, the food, or the land. It's in the resilience. It's in the people. It's in the unfinished story waiting for new storytellers. And that's why this conversation matters, especially for us, Gen Z. We're growing up in a world that rarely teaches us in history, rarely challenges us to think bigger about where we come from, and rarely invites us into conversations like this. But we deserve to know. We deserve to see the full picture so we can shape what comes next. So, how will you be a part of it? I challenge you to start today. Not tomorrow, not one day, today. Even if it's as simple as sharing this episode with one friend who needs to hear it, that's a step. That's how we build a collective. That's how we shift the narrative. And when we move together, we're unstoppable. Here's what I want to know. If you could invest in Ghana, not just with money, but with your time, your skills, your voice, what would you invest in? Tell me in the comments. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like and subscribe and follow Daylight About Africa on Instagram and TikTok so we can keep this conversation going.